This is Nonfiction Takeaway from The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. The book is divided into 3 parts. In part 1, Haidt talks about how intuitions come first and strategic reasoning second in our moral thinking. In part 2, he talks about how there's more to morality than harm and fairness. In part 3, he talks about how morality binds and blinds us. The central metaphor of part 1 is that the mind is divided like a rider on an elephant. The job of the rider, our conscious or rational mind, is to serve the elephant. The job of the elephant, our subconscious, is to govern most of our behavior. Haidt tries to find out where our morality comes from and concludes that it's both innate and learned, and it varies somewhat by culture. Haidt is not, however, the type of relativist who will say that all moralities are equally good. One important point of part 1 is that intuitions come first, and strategic reasoning second. According to Haidt, our moral thinking is more like a politician searching for votes than a scientist searching for truth. We care much more about what others think of us than about truth. Most of the time the rider simply tries to justify the opinions of the elephant, that is, the opinions we already hold, instead of finding out about the truth. In moral and political matters we are groupish rather than selfish, meaning that we use reason to support our team or the interests of the group. Most action in moral psychology is in the intuitions. The central metaphor of part 2 is that the righteous mind is like a tongue with 6 taste receptors. They are care, fairness, loyalty, authority, sanctity. And Haidt adds a 6th module, liberty. The care foundation evolved because we have to care for vulnerable children or offspring. Fairness evolved to avoid exploitation and reap the rewards of cooperation. Loyalty evolved to help us identify people that are not team players. Authority evolved to help us navigate social hierarchies. Sanctity evolved in response to the omnivore's dilemma. It helps us avoid pathogens and parasites. To improve the moral foundations theory, Haidt and colleagues added the liberty foundation, that evolved to make people notice and resent signs of attempted domination. And they modified the fairness foundation to focus more on proportionality. When it comes to moral psychology, Haidt notes that weird societies, that is, Western, educated, industrial, rich and democratic societies, are different from other societies. They see the world as full of separate objects rather than relationships. That is, moral concerns are here limited to concerns about individuals harming other individuals. Our morality binds us together in groups and blinds us to the existence and coherence of other groups. This is part of the reason why good people are divided by politics and religion. The central metaphor of the book's 3rd part is that human beings are 90% chimp and 10% bee. Human beings are mainly shaped by natural selection working at the level of the individual, but, according to Haidt, we also have a few group-related adaptations. We are conditional hive creatures. We can transcend self-interest and lose ourselves when we become part of the whole. We need access to healthy hives in order to flourish. In other words, Haidt argues that human nature was produced by natural selection working at 2 levels simultaneously: the individual level as well as the group level. This is controversial because it's difficult to see how group selection could evolve given the advantage of protecting the self and one's kin. So why are good people divided by politics and religion? Well, in part because our minds were designed for groupish righteousness. We subscribe to moral foundations to varying degrees. We have different moral taste receptors, so to speak. The most sacred moral value for liberals is care, and to a lesser extent fairness and liberty. They may go so far as to reject sanctity, loyalty and authority as moral values at all. The most sacred value for libertarians, unsurprisingly, is individual liberty, and to some extent fairness. Other moral values play a minor role for libertarians. The most sacred value for social conservatives is to preserve the institutions and traditions that sustain a moral community. As the only group, they tend to focus on all 6 taste receptors in their moral thinking. So how do we get around our differences? Well, Haidt suggests that liberal, libertarian, and conservative viewpoints are all needed to create balance in the world. If you want to change people's minds, you've got to talk to their elephants. You have to step outside of the moral matrix, where everybody thinks they're right, and understand how our moral universes are constructed. This just might provide the necessary moral humility that we need to understand each other. That was Nonfiction Takeaway from The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. He has written an easy-to-read but profound book about our differences in moral psychology. I highly recommend it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more Nonfiction Takeaway.